comes to sustainability in Kiwi businesses, now is the time for action. So how are seasoned corporate sustainability leaders making progress on New Zealand's gnarliest sustainability challenges? Let's find out. I'm Jay Krangle, Head of ESG at the Sustainable Business Council.
I'm Alec Tang, Sustainable Value Partner at KPMG.
And I'm Kila Anthony, Sustainable Value Associate Director at KPMG.
In this joint SBC and KPMG podcast series, we'll be talking with leaders in the business sustainability community in New Zealand about their efforts to shift the dial on sustainability in Aotearoa, despite challenging headwinds.
Kia ora koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to another episode of Sustainability Superstars with SBC, KPMG, and today Christchurch International Airport. I am so pleased today to be joined by Claire Waghorn. She is the Sustainability Transition Leader at the airport. She was just telling us that she grew up in the Solomon Islands, which I'm fascinated to hear more about, and has worked for 20 years in sustainability, starting in policy and now in the business side. Welcome, Claire.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Claire. Kia ora, Jay. And awesome to have you here. Our first question, which I always love hearing the responses from our participants, is about your role and how you would describe your role to a 5-year-old.
Well, I've actually done this a number of times. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old now. And it initially started really broad, just like I work in the airport, and that was pretty exciting because there were planes and my kiddies liked that. But we've got a little bit more sophisticated as we go on. So my role as a sustainable transition leader at the airport is to help the airport and support the airlines to reduce their harmful impact on the environment. So even though we've made great progress at the airport itself, the next big challenge is to help the airlines and all the transport that comes to the airport to move towards using cleaner energy and creating less pollution. So it's really just about supporting everyone who works with the airport on their journey to a more sustainable future. A little bit like how you can get electric cars. We're sort of trying to find the plain alternative to our fossil fuels.
Yeah, I love it. And I love when we've been going through this is finding those points of resonance, right? And the which is lovely to know that we're seeing so many electric cars that it becomes a point of easy reference for a 5-year-old, and what does that look like from an aviation perspective? Love it.
My child will literally walk down the street and judge cars based on whether they have exhaust pipes or not.
Oh, brilliant! It'll be one of those. It'll be like the landline, right? The cars with the exhaust. What were they used for? I don't know what they were for.
Exactly.
I certainly hope so. I can take a bit of a guess at the answer to this, Claire, but what is your wicked sustainability challenge, and what have you learned so far from trying to tackle that?
Yeah. My challenge, I'm going to pick aviation, shockingly. But so I worked for a long time, as you mentioned in the intro, I worked for the Green Party, both in New Zealand and globally. And I felt really overwhelmed by the scale of the climate crisis. Really good structural work was being done, but it still felt too big and that not enough progress was being made. And so I didn't think being a climate generalist was a good option for my well-being. I thought instead, what if I picked a really hard-to-abate sector and tried to become a specialist? I was really tempted to go into community gardens. That seemed like a very nice place. But I thought, no, pick something really hard. Do a deep dive into it and see if you can help change the dial. And wouldn't that be amazing if you could change the dial in a hard-to-abate sector? And I really like aviation. Of all the hard-to-abate sectors, I feel more passionately about aviation than steel or concrete or coal. And I think there's something, really important about connecting globally. So decarbonising aviation, that is my wicked challenge, and man, it's complex. And I think it's just that we need to change. And balancing the urgency of climate action with a complex, interconnected global system with effectively hundreds of thousands of dependent livelihoods. It's really, really interesting. It definitely keeps me employed, but it's a really wicked problem. if I was to break it down into something a little bit more tangible, then it would look something like, first off, decarbonise airport operations. So we can do that within the boundaries of this business. We can transition the assets to clean fuel alternatives, and we can make those buying, purchasing decisions ourselves. Broader than that, then we now have supporting the airlines with their transition plans, which for us means investing and partnering on large-scale energy generation. So we're building a solar farm that's 170 megawatts when we need between 4 and 10 megawatts for our operations. So the reason to go big is such so that you have enough generation to then start edging out fossil fuel, replacing it with a clean alternative. And then we need to prepare for the low carbon fuels like electric, of which, little known fact, we already have an electric aircraft in operation at Christchurch Airport. It's called Electric Air, and it's fabulous. It's a 2-seater pipistrel with an engine the size of a Nissan Leaf, and it's very quiet and it's very beautiful. But these are all sort of steps. There's electric aircraft for the smaller planes. There's green hydrogen in liquid form for our domestic aviation solution, and then longer haul would require sustainable aviation fuel. So lobbying for those things, trying to line up the partners to make those things happen, to set aside the land on our precinct for the new infrastructure that's required, and then to lean in and look for every little step you could be taking now, even if we don't have those aircraft yet. There are tiny little steps every single day. There are things that we could be doing to try and edge forward.
Wow, Claire, I feel like you could do a really cool TED talk on the detailed technical side of aviation transition, but in quite an engaging way. So let's put a pin in that as maybe the second series of this podcast. Interested to know, just briefly, in a couple of bullets, perhaps, what's your key takeaway from working in this challenge? What have you learned?
I think this sounds really cliche, but to be kind. Everyone has bumps along the way, and it's very easy to be impatient. I think frustration comes from fear, and for those of us in the climate space, we're really aware of what we have to be fearful of, but we can't stop, and something is better than nothing, and we're all human. And I think treating others as empathy as we keep trying seems really critical to me. And I have definitely been, I would say at least 15 or 20 years being impatient. And I think it's only now that I'm starting to realize, you can't change, and possibly this has come through parenting, you can't influence people and change hearts and minds when they're in a place of feeling criticized or fearful, or, actually I think being kind and meeting people where they are and having conversations with people that disagree with you, it strikes me as one of the most powerful things we can do.
A beautiful message. Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, such a great message, and I think it leads into my next question about your reflections on being in this industry, this role of driving change over 20 odd years, as you've said, and what have you learned? But I also, just before you go there, I love the message that you shared about it's still a step forward. Like we're moving forward. It may seem very small, but actually they build, and it's really important to remember that, particularly now as we go forward. But maybe going back to the question at hand, and what is that evolution? You talked about one there about maybe impatience to actually recognizing how we drive change. How have you seen the work that we do, the industry that we work in, evolve over the many years that you've been part of it?
Oh, I actually think, if you take a big picture, where we are right now isn't so bad. Actually, we're getting really strong engagement from investors and regulators and communities pushing for transparency and real action. And I'm a massive fan of climate risk disclosures. Get so much interest from boards now. And if you look at Institute of Directors, they put out I think it's monthly magazine called Boardroom. There is always an article on climate change from a topic that nobody wanted to talk about, that was just a bit weird and niche, it's good business sense now. Like, you need to have those skills around the boardroom table. That's massive. I feel really encouraged by that, and I don't think that's something that you can roll backwards. That's there now, and it's just recognition that it makes good business sense. I also think the emergence of coalitions and cross-sector alliances, I feel like I'm seeing more of those pop up, and yes, we want all of the actions, that less hooey, more doey, famous phrase of James Shaw's that really landed, I think, at one stage. But I do think there's this emergence of willing parties to work together and try and drive change. And I find that incredibly encouraging. We've got a couple of them in the aviation space. There's this beautiful industry group at the moment that's working on trying to really move forward sustainable aviation fuel access for New Zealand. And I think there's actually quite a few things to feel encouraged about. We're definitely heading in a direction that perhaps isn't as fast as we want it to go, but sustainability and climate in particular is getting more space than it did, certainly for the first 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's bang on, right? We often forget to look backwards from where we've come and see that we have shifted quite far. Like, your point about the IAD now, the climate conversation is really prevalent in the boardroom, which is fantastic. And I think there's a fantastic point you made in terms of collaboration. And one of our challenges is often we just look at our own work and we forget about what everyone else is doing, which is such a beautiful comment that actually someone else has been working perhaps on a very similar, because there are more and more people working in this domain, that someone else has done something that actually adds to and makes our life a little bit easier. So I think that's a beautiful kind of additional benefit of this more collaborative nature that we talk about.
Absolutely.
Also, I love climate-related disclosures is my quote of the interview. I'm going to make you a T-shirt that says that, Claire, as thank you for being part of this podcast.
Awesome.
Going back to you at the start of your career, what advice would you give your younger self when you were first starting out in this space?
I'm going to say not everyone is going to like what I do, and that's okay, and to try and find a way of accepting that. I think I grew up as a devout people pleaser who just wanted to collect all the gold stars in class. And I think, again, this is about meeting people with empathy. Don't create others. Go and have conversations. And don't be worn down by it either. Be relentless. Grab hold of friends and keep going. And so earlier this year, we had our airport got airport's first electric fire truck. And this was a big deal because it was actually, I think, the second in the world. And we had lobbied for a long time to have this fire truck built, and we knew that we didn't want to purchase a brand new diesel one. When it came to the reporting of our brand new fire truck that we were so proud of, we got from the Stuff crowd, that was a really woke go broke interpretation of our decisions to buy a fire truck, and from RNZ it was, your truck isn't even a plane. So you just sort of, you can't win. And I think I was really, in a sense, I wasn't bothered by that. I realized I'd got to a place where I knew that what we were doing felt like the right thing to do, that actually, even though it's one fire truck, and yes, we've not solved aviation yet, it is one piece, and every little piece counts. And we're a company that has made a commitment to get to absolute zero. And we could pull out, we could say, well, it's too expensive and we're close enough, but we're not. We're sticking with that, and that means sticking with that commitment and swapping out those assets and spending the money on them. And yes, they're not planes, they're trucks. We'll get there. But I would have probably taken that more personally at a younger stage. And I think I'm getting there. And I would encourage, and I would say this to any sustainability professional, particularly in hard to abate sectors, the criticism is rife from all directions, and just to find friends, hold on and keep going.
I love that. I feel like this is the parable of the electric fire truck, which could be another excellent TED talk. So look forward to seeing you next season.
Yeah. Before we go on to the last question, and it kind of lends nicely to your last point about piece of advice. Now, when you started talking about hard to abate sector, complex challenge, I mean, what other things? So you've talked about, keeping people around you. How else do you keep yourself resilient through that? Is there anything else that you might suggest in terms of, particularly, it's challenging and things don't always go and you don't want to take it personally, but is there anything else that you'd share on that vein?
Yeah, I'd say go tramping. That always helps. Sporadically delete LinkedIn. That also helps. And then I often think of James Shaw and Charles Darwin. For both of them, when I think of James Shaw, I think he, in my mind, made the biggest impact in his parliamentary career on climate, but he didn't hold the budget strings. He was in a space he was a Green MP in a Labour caucus, and he definitely got criticised so much from climate side of you're not doing enough, yet was able to make phenomenal progress, I think, on structural things and on the business side of turning the flywheel. And so I think, gosh, if people can criticise him, it's okay to be criticised, because I really hold him in high regard for the impact that he had. The other one was Charles Darwin. I mean, I think about him and Origin of the Species and his work on science and evolution and all of this at a time when science was niche and Christianity was sort of the norm, and it was challenging ideas of evolution and all of this. And he got criticised enormously in his space as well. And so you just sort of think, gosh, change brings criticism, but we still need to change. So lean into it, let it wash.
Brilliant. Love it. I think that the great examples. So in terms of, we've talked a lot about looking back. Now, looking forward, what's your hope for the future of sustainable business?
Well, I hope that business leaders will prioritise planetary health over short-term profits, and it will feel weird because I think so many of them weren't trained with that particular model for business in mind. But I think leaning into partnerships and recognising the transition as a strategic necessity, I hope that becomes the norm. And I believe that is happening. I believe there is a mind shift that's happening at that strategic governance level. I also absolutely think as a society we could solve the climate crisis right now if we really prioritised it. So for me, it's always going to be, we have incredible technology and innovation out there. We have good people that just really want to see change. And I think it's just a matter of businesses and governments recognising this, holding hands and stepping in together, because it makes good business sense to do so. And there are massive, massive benefits in taking action, not least of which is a habitable planet. We just need to line up and do it. So my hope is that we just get that step lined up and just commit to it. Yeah.
On a positive note to end on, Claire, thank you. You have been the master of the one-liners in this interview. I liked change brings criticism, but we still need to change. And particularly loved be relentless, grab hold of friends and keep going. And we certainly hope that you keep going with the wonderful work that you do. So thank you for your contribution to decarbonising aviation, and thank you for your contribution to this podcast today, Claire.
Thank you for having me.